My name is Englandia, and we're about to begin the Sovryn community call. If someone is able to record a backup, just in case, um, just in case something happens with this recording, because it's continuing from when I attempted recording an hour ago. Just as a backup, I think this is fine, but that would be very helpful. I appreciate it. So without further ado, I would like to kick off this call with an awesome rap verse, specifically designed for all you Sovrynauts. And I'm going to kick it off right now. So here goes, world premiere, once again. Okay, 1 second. Grab a chair and seat yourself. Insiders know we crossed 7 million TVL. Sovereigns looking sweet as hell. We are making strides on the rise. Now you got yourself a chance to liquidity mine. Plug your wallet to the single-sided AMMs. Bitcoin, USDT, I shouldn't have to say again. Maybe you'll relay a friend. Pushing out proposals like send it, passing votes with a positive percentage. What you know about consensus. Making sure that nobody can take away your money because the private keys are held in your custody and easy like it's 1, 2, 3. Englandia is sovereign. This is Chess and I am Stockfish. If you're bearish, you should stop it. Yeah, better hurry up and log in because the sovereign call has started. Permissionless protocol, censorship resistant, scalable system. Now it's time to reconvene and get a brief of the mission. Okay. I hope you all heard that. Yeah, it came out. Okay, cool. So thanks, guys, for listening. I appreciate the claps. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. It keeps me going. Thank you, guys. Thank you for joining us here. Thank you for sharing in this mission. My name is Englandia. I help with business development for Sovryn. And the rules are, if you're not speaking, please mute yourself. If you would like to speak, please toggle the mute button back and forth to get our attention. If that doesn't work, feel free to politely jump into the conversation. So before we go through the agenda, would anyone like to introduce themselves and say hello?
Oh, Mr. K tuning in from Denver. Always great to be here.
Is that someone wanting to say hello or background? Okay. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and introduce Edan Yago, one of the leads of Sovryn with the governance report.
Hi, everyone. Great to have you all on the call. I'd like to start with a story which I think helps illustrate the chaos and insanity and innovation that is Sovryn, and sort of what a day in the life of a contributor to Sovryn looks like. So today, I think at like 6 a.m. in the morning, I got a message from someone saying, why, this is a very angry message, why has FastBTC been renamed to Top Up? And then later, over the course of the day, there were a number of messages, most of them angry, from different contributors, especially on the community team, who very, I think, justifiably pointed out, look, the community know what FastBTC is. We've been putting out a wiki. We've been putting out videos. We've created a huge amount of information about what FastBTC is. People are using it. We've had like 2,000 different transactions over the last week on FastBTC. Why would we suddenly change the name without telling anyone? So I started trying to research this, or like put on my Sherlock Holmes hat and figure out where this happened. So I spoke to Tsu, who manages the UI, and Tsu was, well, many months ago we had it named as we used to call it Top Up because eventually we want to have 7 billion users who can use the system, and it needs to be extremely clear what they're doing, and so it needs to be action oriented, and so it needs to be something like Top Up, and then it's intuitive to any person in the world what they are doing and why they need to do it. But at the same time, we don't want to change horses midstream, so I'm not entirely sure why this was done. Anyway, this entire process has gone on until about 30 seconds ago, because 30 seconds ago, in fact, I haven't even finished the process. I'm currently in the middle of a flow, which is the answer to why it got changed to top up. And the reason it got changed to top up, turns out, is because part of the team, one of the contributors, have implemented to Sovryn a fiat on-ramp, so that now people from most of the countries in the world can use credit cards or banks without KYC or with extremely light KYC to basically get Bitcoin on Sovryn, which is fucking bonkers. It's like a phenomenal accomplishment, and it just kind of happened. And so I use this story to illustrate the monster of chaos that is Sovryn. Like, all of these different contributors are working very hard to put together things. There's not the typical kind of, there's no company, there's no setting of direction in the same way that you would see a company, right? People get clear mandates. People can basically take initiative and do. And as a result, we get vastly more innovation and vastly more chaos. So I think there's a lot of things to learn from this. First of all, we can't expect Sovryn to behave as a company. We can't expect it to provide customer service. Instead, it's got community support. A lot of that is volunteers who are providing answers to questions. A lot of it is just members of the community kind of just answering something because they got the same answer yesterday. We can't expect it to be as organized and as clearly predictable as other projects. Like, there have been, every single day I go onto the channels and I see people asking, when is this going to happen? When is the sale? When is there's not going to be the same level of here's a release date we commit to. Most of the time, the release date is not something that anyone can commit to until there's been a vote, or even the decision to do something doesn't happen until there's a vote in the Bitcoins. On the other hand, right, we're paying the price of not having very clear organization. But on the other hand, you wake up one morning and you've got a fiat on-ramp. You wake up another morning, you've got new statistics pages. You wake up the other morning and a feature which no one was expecting is suddenly available. And so I think that is the glory and the beauty and the disadvantage of Sovryn. And it's just really living in the belly of this beast is truly a mind-bending, wonderful experience. So, with that story, I'd like to take us through my part of the agenda, which is the governance, and a few other bits and bobs. We have had, from my personal perspective, a very binary experience. I think we have been working on a lot of chunky things, and one of the big things that we were hoping to have is SOV BTC trading basically start this week, and it's been postponed. I expect it will probably happen next week. And the reason it got postponed was a number of things. One, there was an issue that we discovered, voted on, and corrected with regards to the ability to claim Origins SOV. And the second thing is, we had a coincidence. The team is very stretched as it is, but we had coincidentally a whole bunch of people who, for medical, religious, or vacation or monsoon reasons, were not available this week. And so, unfortunately, that got pushed off. And I think the thing is, we all take this extremely seriously. One of the, we talk about basically the Sovryn core team having three priorities. The first priority is safety and security. The second priority is speed. And sometimes those are in conflict, but we always want to be moving, as fast or as any project in the world or faster. So we get frustrated when things are a little bit slower than we'd like. But for the team, I think it's important to remember that the stuff that we're building out, bridges, Bitcoin, trustless Bitcoin peg, roll up, all of the various different features, liquidity mining, all being rolled out in parallel. I don't think there's another team in the world that is doing it. I don't think there's another project in the world that is doing it, and certainly not with the sort of not one that is like 7 months old and a relatively young and small still. So I think everyone on the core team really should be proud of themselves. Okay, so to the SIPs that we had over the course of the last 2 weeks, we had SIP 14, which flew through. SIP 14 was a vote to allow a syndicate of strategic investors to acquire from Sovryn 1.5 up to 1.5 million SOV. That passed with a very, very high degree of support. It was over 99% support, and most of that is now coming to a close. And actually, we are in the process of trying to find out which of these syndicate members want to be public, and I think it's going to be the majority of them, but they'll need to do that at their own time. But I expect that over the next short period, let's call it a week or two, that all will be sorted and announced. Second was SIP 15. SIP 15 is the first vote that has ever passed with 100% consensus, which was really cool to watch. And SIP 15 was about creating the exchequer, in which the community appointed 7 chancellors of the exchequer to help manage the sovereign treasury. That exchequer has already made a few decisions. The 2 most important decisions we've already started seeing implemented. One was, by having the exchequer, we were able to start the liquidity mining program that is happening, and which, if you haven't already looked into and participated in, I would strongly suggest you take a look at, because it's very cool and a way to earn some SOV. The second decision, which was taken, was that all of the core contributors have received a SOV bonus, which is going to be vested over a 24-month period in light of the contribution that they've made, and to make sure that they are now trapped with this project, because it's vesting over 24 months. So they now have no choice but to continue working on the project for at least the next 24 months. Not that I think anyone feels trapped, but golden cage. And then finally, SIP 16, which was I think a really great demonstration of coordination even under chaos. The staking contracts that we have for governance are relatively complex, and were not initially designed with the idea of having separate lockup and vesting periods. And so when the lockup but no vesting was created for Origins, it introduced a small bug. This bug was identified, voted on by the community, and fixed within a few days. A really impressive job. And in particular, James Howlett was the dev who was working on that, and I think deserves a great deal of recognition. Because we have, so actually, I'm going to go on to talk about the development work which has been happening, which is quite a lot. And I'll be talking about this because Aurora is not currently available. But before I do, I wanted to check in with you guys. Are there any questions?
Hey guys, it's Whipper. Just a quick question with regards to the fiat on-ramp. what sort of precautions is the team looking at with regards to the use of illegal credit card activity or fake credit cards fraud related? What sort of things do we have to protect ourselves before giving up any RBTC or BTC for those types of transactions?
Given that I only recently discovered this was implemented in this way, I can't give a perfect answer. Maybe someone else can, but my understanding is that we're actually not taking on any of the risk. That there's an integration with a company called Transact, and there's basically an integration via their API. And I think they are taking the risk. But Inglandia, I think maybe you are the best positioned person to answer this question.
I'm sorry, could you repeat it?
Question was, are we taking on any risk from credit card fraud?
Taking on risk from credit.
So I don't think so.
The fiat on ramp.
It's tough
with
to say. I mean, it's the same amount of risk that other exchanges would take on, in my opinion.
I don't think so. I don't know if Victor or Bitcoinera are on, but basically the only way a user who uses fiat receives RBTC is if we've already received the BTC. Is that correct, Bitcoinera?
I don't think either of them are on the call.
All right. My understanding is basically transact.
Guys, if we don't have a clear answer today, just because it's so new, you can push off the question for another time. That's totally cool.
I believe that basically there's no one offering. No, Sovryn isn't touching credit cards or fiat or KYC and never will. So the way it's been implemented is basically Transact send Bitcoin. We receive the Bitcoin, and then the user receives RBTC, and Transact receives the fiat. We are not in the fiat BTC loop at all, and are not taking on any of their risk.
Totally cool, and I think that's a super awesome feature to have, so congrats to the team for that.
Any other questions, guys? Cool, awesome.
Yeah.
Oh yes, sir. Who's speaking?
I heard in the TM is speaking.
Okay.
I heard in the, I think in a forum or Discord or Telegram, I can't remember, about considerations of having a legal entity to established. And my question would be, do we need such thing? And is there any progress, or what's the kind of thinking around that question?
Yeah, so that's a good question.
I can.
Yeah, please. I was going to ask if you're here.
Yeah, so the simple answer is no, we do not need a legal entity. The sovereign treasury and majority of payments and expenses made by the protocol are in crypto, and we're a crypto native project. However, there are instances when it's important to have a legal entity in order to transact with external third parties, such as exchanges, market makers, and others who facilitate trading with SOV beyond the sovereign exchange. So the idea behind the legal entity is that it is a nice to have, and the legal entity that we're exploring is a new construct in which the only mandate that the entity has is to follow Bitocracy remits or actions that are approved by Bitocracy, and the legal entity itself will operate as a non-profit. So, you know, as I mentioned, it's not a must, but for a number of the projects that we're involved in, and in order to give as much exposure to SOV to the community, it's an important piece of the puzzle.
Yes, thanks for your answer. I totally get that point. But in my thinking, and I may be wrong totally, it is more of, I mean, it's nice to have, yes, that's true. Maybe it's a requirement on certain places, but doesn't it give a lot of exposure to legal, like it is a burden and it gives a lot of legal headaches and like bans and whatever. So that's my kind of thinking. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know absolutely what you mean. I think it very much depends on the jurisdiction in which it's established, and it also depends on the structure, whether it's a for-profit, a non-profit, whether the directors themselves can be dismissed by Bitocracy, the level of control that Bitocracy has. In essence, if structured right, it's not an entity that will exert any level of control over the ecosystem, and as such, I don't think will be viewed as a nexus of control that can jeopardize either the project or be in non-compliance with any regulation. Again, this is an ongoing review that we're doing, and the constructs that are arising in different jurisdictions are relatively new and are actually being created in order to facilitate this kind of activity. So yes, regulation is always something that we're keeping an eye on, also in this regard. But overall, I think what the team thinks and what the opinions that we've received so far is that the risks or the benefits with doing this far outweigh the risks.
I'd just add to that, while it won't be exactly the same, as an analogy, one can think of the Bitcoin Foundation that was formed in 2012. The Bitcoin Foundation was formed very early on in Bitcoin's history, and it still exists today. It was quite useful for a year or two, managing to help organize conferences, direct messaging. There was someone for a journalist to talk to while this was still so weird and no one could understand what it was. And so for a year or two, it was useful. After that, it became a bit of a joke, and now no one even knows that it really exists anymore. In fact, there are people on the team who were part of the Bitcoin Foundation back in the day.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. So I was the system administrator from the Bitcoin Foundation from 2012 to 2015. Went through Mt. Gox collapsing and all of the attempt, Gavin Anderson going to speak to the CIA and Charlie Shrem getting arrested and all of that chaos. And more recently worked with Status, and going through that, it's pretty standard to establish a foundation in a proper jurisdiction. It's been going on for about 3 years, and now we call it jurisdictional arbitrage. There's many jurisdictions right now competing for crypto compliant, crypto and fiat compliant company structures. So it's not really odd, and things are moving in that sort of direction.
Yeah, and I think the thing to remember is that the Bitcoin Foundation, while a little bit useful, never had any particular
it never had a
control over
mandate,
Bitcoin.
really.
Yeah.
I mean, so companies like Coin Center went on to do lobbying in Washington and took over the things that the Bitcoin Foundation was initially intended to do. It was kind of conceived as something like the Linux Foundation, but it never really achieved that. But I think that the message that we would like to transport is that contemporaneously there are jurisdictions in which an organization like Sovryn can interface with legacy institutions, and that space is developing very quickly.
Okay, so I'm gonna move on to the development report. So, bridges. There are currently 2 bridges in development: the ETH bridge and the Binance Smart Chain bridge, which will make it much easier to start bringing on stablecoin liquidity, as well as many other types of tokens which can be traded, shorted, etc. Both of them have been on testnet for a while now. Work has been done towards deploying them on mainnet, and that work is ongoing. For religious reasons, the 2 primary devs who were working on it have not worked on it this week. but we expect that next week they'll continue, and then quite shortly afterwards we expect to have the bridges on mainnet. There's also been progress on the Sovryn PTC trustless peg. I have been managing to work through it on testnet, so we have an internal testnet working right now, and I'm hoping that quite soon there'll be a publicly available testnet, so you guys will all be able to get some experience on it. And I think that after that we might be able to start making very, very fast progress in getting it to mainnet. And there'll be quite a lot of information about how you guys can participate in that. You know, run nodes, act as bond providers, earn fees through that. It will also make it much, much easier to transfer funds back to Bitcoin main chain. So it's a Bitcoin back to Bitcoin main chain, and I think I think it's going to be a big step forward for us. There's also been progress on the rollup. We are running it on 2 separate testnets right now. We're running it on the RSK testnet. There have been some issues in porting it to RSK, so we're also running it on Ethereum testnet to test out a bunch of things. I think their progress has been slower for us, and also slower for the off-chain labs team who we're working with on this. But it feels like it's getting pretty close, and I'm hoping there as well we will soon have a public testnet that you guys will be able to experience and give us feedback on. We have, as you guys know, always placed a very strong emphasis on unit tests for the system. We decided about a month ago to migrate our unit tests were written on Brownie and Truffle. We decided to migrate them all to Hardhat. Most of that work, which has been a lot of boring work, it has been completed now. Tyrone has been managing that process, as well as GM Crypto. So hats off to them, hard hats off to them. Most of that work is now complete. There's been a lot of improvements being introduced to Sovryn nodes, which is an ongoing process, and the team working on that is growing. I think it will take a long time before we have an easy UI so that pretty much everyone will be able to use Sovryn nodes, but it's becoming easier and easier for people who are a little bit more technically oriented to start running nodes in a useful way. A lot of UI work has been happening, and a lot of UI work still needs to happen. Some of the key things that have been happening, that have happened over the last sprint is introducing the ability to withdraw Sov tokens, which works, and once we execute the change that was voted on next week, should be a pretty simple process. Hardware wallet integration, we're working to do something different from pretty much every single other DEP that I'm familiar with, which is allow you to operate with a DEP directly from your hardware wallet without having to go through a browser wallet. That work too has been a huge amount of work and is almost done. Victor really gets has been putting in the hours around that. We have a design system which will make it much easier to improve and launch UI in the future. So if you look at the new stats page, the hard work there was building out the analytics engine to do that, and that was done by Betsy. But once it was done, it was very easy for Betsy to basically get it up on testnet and get it up on mainnet within a few days. And so I think that's going to allow us to start getting, now that we've been laying a lot of pipe, I believe that we'll start to see faster progress in terms of the front end being able to represent that. And then there've also been improvements to the Bitocracy. Some of them are on testnet. You can go check them out there, and they'll be migrated to mainnet once we've had enough testing. So again, I encourage everyone to go out and try all of the different things on testnet. There've been ongoing, anytime you guys have been reporting bugs, we look to squash them, and that has continued. And then we are currently in the process of finalizing the testing of the RBTC sorry, of the BTC SOV trading pool, and so I expect that will be on mainnet next week, and on testnet before that, or early next week. So I'm going to pause here. If there are any questions, happy to try and answer, and then we can talk about creative design with Sue.
Hey, my name is David. I have a quick question on the Sovryn BTC peg. I guess, why is it needed? Is our BTC inefficient? And if we do opt for the Sovryn BTC peg, which it sounds like we are, is there a concern that we're kind of bifurcating the market and we have, BTC, RBTC, Sovryn BTC? I'm just curious, kind of the thought process behind all of that and what the inefficiencies of RBTC are.
Yeah, fantastic questions. So why have it in the first? There are a number of limitations that we've discussed several times with the current RBTC peg. One of the key limitations is that there's a hard limit on how many Bitcoin can be moved into the system. We have consistently hit and broken that limit, and so that limit has been increased. But that limit is increased in a centralized manner, which is unpredictable, and I don't think something Sovryn should be relying upon. There's also the issue that it is quite inefficient in that it takes 24 hours to move funds on and off the system. And there are also several current limitations on which addresses you can even perform the transactions from, which type of Bitcoin addresses. And then finally, it's the trust model on RBTC is, I think, better than pretty much any other peg in the world, but it's not as trustless as the, at least in my view, and this is a debatable question, but I don't believe it's as trustless as the Sovryn BTC peg will be. So, so that's the answer as to why. Now, the question around bifurcating is a very important one. There's currently a team called Babelfish, who are working on building technology to aggregate different asset types. And what that would mean is that you could have multiple different ways of getting, generating an asset. So, for example, you could have two different types of pegs for BTC. You could have different types of USDT depending on which chain or which bridge they come from. But you would then be able to have a smart contract aggregate them into one token, unifying them for simplicity and liquidity purposes. I think it's a really interesting project. And I don't know if Dark Knight is here. Dark Knight, are you here? No.
Hi. Yes.
Hey. You wanna tell people a little bit about Babelfish?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Cool. So yeah, like Iago said, I'm part of the community, and this is a need that we foresaw for Sovryn. There's a lot of liquidity coming on the BTC side, and there's a lot of stablecoin liquidity coming as well. And we're just trying to unite it, right? So not only to bring BTC and stablecoins from one chain into Rootstock, but also to unify all of these wrapped assets of the same pegged assets in different chains, and try to solve this problem and bring it to liquidity, bring liquidity to Sovryn to begin with. Right now, we are just starting. You can follow us on Twitter. It's just Babelfish Money, and we're always looking for new people. This is a very exciting project, and it will definitely be an important piece of the Lego that Sovryn is helping to build on Bitcoin Layer 2.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Dark Knight. I think you are the hero we need, if not the hero we deserve. Yeah, so I'm certain that it's not going to be 100% smooth sailing. We'll need to, people need to understand how to use it, and we'll need to figure out how best to implement that into the system. But it is being built, and I think actually is probably only a few weeks away from at least testnet, if not mainnet. So Sovryn BTC and Babelfish might be ready at around the same time. Did that answer your question?
Yes, awesome, thank you.
Any other questions?
I've got a quick question. With the hardware wallets, if we lock our Sovryn, if we stake it in our current wallets and then that rolls out, will we be able to use that hardware wallet, or will we need to wait until that time limit on staking is done?
Let me try and make sure I understand what you mean. You're talking about the liquidity mining, and you're talking about placing BTC into the BTC USDT pool, and you're asking whether or not your funds get locked up. Is that correct?
Well, will the Sov token be able to be put on the hardware wallet? And if it is, and we've got it locked up in staking using another wallet, will we be able to then not be able to use that hardware wallet to move our Sov into? Here's what I'm thinking. If Sov really takes off and it becomes, the price really goes up, it would be great to have the security of a hardware wallet. But if I've got it staked in a MetaMask wallet, let's say, then will it be locked there until that term of the staking is up?
Okay, that's a good question. So let me make a differentiate. So first of all, the easy part of that question to answer is that yes, Sov will work on hardware wallets. Already does actually. With regards to the second question, let's make a differentiation between a wallet, which is sort of like the the implementation. It could be MetaMask, it could be a mobile phone, it could be a hardware wallet, and the private key, right, or the seed, which is kind of the actual wallet, right? You can take a seed, right, and you can move that between the different instantiations. So you could have a MetaMask wallet and port it to a Nifty. You could then port it to a hardware wallet. It's not always the most fun. It's like anytime I'm doing that, I'm basically having a heart attack. But it's definitely something which can be done. I think that because introducing a seed is something that you want to avoid doing as much as possible. It's best if you would like to use a hardware wallet to try and start with the hardware wallet, but it is possible to move it between different instantiations.
I think an important point to make here is what you mentioned is that you can already use SOV with a hardware wallet. There are several browser extensions that work with the Sovryn dApp, like Nifty and MetaMask, that support plugging in a hardware wallet. The hardware wallet integration that was being discussed earlier was being able to actually just plug in your hardware wallet into your computer and use it directly with the dApp without needing to have a browser extension like MetaMask or Nifty installed. So if you want to use a hardware wallet today with SOV, with the Sovryn dApp, you can just use it with MetaMask or Nifty or any other RSK compatible wallet interface that supports hardware wallets. If you don't want to install one of these third-party browser extensions, then you'll have to wait for the direct hardware wallet integration in the Sovryn dApp to be ready.
Thank you.
Cool. And with that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Tsu.
Hi guys. Last time I was telling you that we've been working on a new website. The website is now in development, so we expect to have that in a few weeks. So that should be really helpful for explaining, especially more, I guess, to new users what's going on. But it should be helpful for you guys as well. We've also been working on the interface for this hardware wallet connection, and at the same time as that, we've changed the flow kind of slightly of how all of the wallets connect. It should be a lot more straightforward and easier for everyone. And then we've started working on the market making interface to make that more intuitive, have a history, and be able to show you what you're actually earning. On top of that, we've got some kind of interesting kind of projects kind of bubbling away. So we've got like a comic book writer in now who's starting to write up some stories. So we hope to start kind of creating some comics to kind of go along with the product, having some interesting stories based on the DeFi universe and our characters and kind of storyline. And on top of that, we would then kind of be creating some kind of like animations. So yeah, creatively, everything should be coming together and looking quite nice kind of soon. So yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to that, and I hope you guys enjoy what we kind of produce. Does anyone have any questions about anything?
I have one question that's not direct.
Yes, please.
That's directed also at Whipper. Are we gonna have a chess tournament again anytime soon?
Yeah, things have been really crazy busy. I'm hoping that we will be picking up our community events sometime next weekend. Yeah, we'll be pausing this weekend, but sometime next weekend. But thanks for that. I appreciate it.
Cool. You can kick my ass then. Nice. I look forward to it.
Sweet.
So do we have I'm just curious, like, are there plans, like what time of the year will there be like this story comic release? Will it be in like tiny episodes, like with the form? What do you see, Zoo?
Well, we've basically only started writing the story, so I guess as we see how the stories are coming out, we'll work out a kind of what works best kind of thing. We were imagining kind of. Actually, I wouldn't want to say anything because, like, yeah, it's such a kind of early kind of stage, and it's so creative. Like, there's so many different possibilities of way things could happen. Sorry.
Don't be sorry. So English. Sorry, I'm just making a comic book for you guys. Stefan, should we switch over to you? Talk about adoption.
Yes, hello everyone. Stefan here. I'm part of the operations team at Sovryn. Unfortunately, Slider was not able to participate today. She apologizes for that, and I will give you the updates from the adoption team. As you all know, we launched the liquidity mining program. We are offering 50K SOV to liquidity providers of the BTC USDT pool. So we hope you will all get involved. Since the program launched just 4 days ago, we have taken in $3.6 million worth of BTC and $1 million worth of USDT. The 50K SOV rewards are split evenly between both sides of the pool. So 25K is available to USDT depositors and 25K to BTC depositors. This means there are currently 3 times the rewards for the USDT depositors. So we encourage you to take advantage of that by moving USDT into the pool. Thank you, Levin, one of our community members. He has released a tutorial on how to get USDT onto the Sovryn platform. So definitely check that out and get involved. Also, now that we have the liquidity mining up and running, we are looking to get Sovryn into the leaderboard at DeFi Pulse. As we stand today, we hope to to make it to the leaderboard somewhere around number 70. And the challenge, of course, for all of us will be to see how quickly we can rise to the top. In other news, our press release is going out next week, naming the companies that joined Pump in the investment round. Like Eden mentioned, let's see, we're still waiting for some of them to confirm. We have also started shaping plans for outreach to the Asian markets, especially focusing at the beginning on China and South Korea. We are talking to 3 companies that offer various services and partnership opportunities. Also, something of major interest for some of you guys. We are now distributing the rewards of our bounty campaigns that took place to promote the token sale and to celebrate the Chinese New Year. People that took part in these campaigns earned a small amount of SOV each, on average around $100 or even less. And in return, they undertook various promotional activities. Happily, we had around 500 participants overall, so we will shortly have 500 more SOV holders in our community. And that's it for now. If there are any questions.
Hey guys, it's Whipper. I just have a question with regards to the that BTC USDT pool. Any idea on an ETA when we might actually see SOV rewards accumulating in real time?
We plan to launch an improved interface next week.
Perfect. That's awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, in that case, I'll just jump in here. There's a really big opportunity for anyone who has BTC that they've transferred to Sovryn. If you're sitting on some BTC, don't just sit on it, put it to work. There's the ability to earn SOV, so I'd encourage you guys to take advantage of that. There's an even bigger opportunity for those of you who have USDT on Ethereum to transfer it over the RSK bridge. Now, the RSK bridge is extremely slow and annoying, and it's not a system that is being built by Sovryn, so you have to use a different system. However, if you're willing to put in that effort, because it's hard, the vast majority of people are not transferring USDT, and so those 25,000 SOV are going to a relatively small number right now. I think, like, people are going to get, if no one else participates, the people who did participate are going to become very, very, very better rewarded than anyone should be. So I would encourage anyone who does have USDT, who can get their hands on some, to try and talk to the community here, figure out how to use the RSK bridge and get some USDT into the system. It's right now, I think, an extremely profitable opportunity. And actually, that's a really great segue to Exiled Surfer.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of USDT in my pocket I'd like to get rid of. So, in far as the community update, we're moving forward on settling the details for the Sovryn Hackathon. After conversations yesterday with the Gitcoin team, we're securing the timeline to start. We're looking at the mid of May. What's really interesting is that RSK is doing a hackathon on Gitcoin starting on the 11th of April, which has resulted in Gitcoin integrating RSK onto the Gitcoin platform, which gives us the opportunity to easily integrate SOV for our bounty programs during the hackathon. Sue and I are working on the interface for the Interspace conference platform, which will offer all of the participants to give their talks and for us to do webinars and things like that with Discord integration and the calendar and direct integration with the Gitcoin platform. So that's moving forward. We would expect that the promotion for the hackathon would start about 3 weeks before the mid of May to on-ramp. We heard some interesting things from Gitcoin team about doing the Binance Hackathon. They had 150 submissions for the Binance Hackathon for projects. There was a lot of interest. Gitcoin has basically 97,000 developers around the world who are working on different products and projects in the open source space. So we're looking forward to not only doing the hackathon on Gitcoin, but then supporting ongoing development and bounties and different kinds of projects for people to contribute to Sovryn. So that's the major thing that's going on there. With the wiki, we've been struggling to keep up with the different changes that have been happening, the features that have been getting implemented. So we're catching up on that level, trying to keep that updated. Another interesting project is we're going to probably be putting out a book about Bitcoin and Bitcoin on DeFi. So we've got our team working on that as well, which will be illustrated by Tsu's team, which will be probably doing some sort of cool promotional offer with limited edition books that are signed by the author, which is a well-known podcaster in Europe, and pairing them with NFTs. We're also moving forward on building the team for the NFT project, which will result in us being able to issue NFTs for different community activities, for participating in the different pre-sale rounds and things like that, and also to have an art curation platform. So those are the things that are primarily happening in the community area. And if anybody has any questions, happy to also answer them. Oh, and a shout out to Whipper. An apology for what seemed to be a little bit of a tense exchange yesterday in our forums.
No worries, mate. That's all good.
Text is hard sometimes, yeah. But
yeah, for sure, absolutely. But I appreciate you coming out like that. We all mean well, and we all want to see the success of the project.
Oh yeah, so I mean, basically, our numbers are growing in Telegram. Our numbers are growing in Discord. The strategy of using Telegram as a doorstep and pushing people over for technical support into Discord has grown our members greatly. Twitter is also expanding on its numbers. So on all of our fronts, we're gaining members to the Sovryn universe. Over to you, Iago, or Ingalandia.
Any more questions before we?
I have a question. It's Whipper again. I'm just wondering if the team is considering. I know that there's other stablecoins available on the system, but it seems like we're really pushing with USDT. And I'm just wondering if anyone else has a concern with regards to the lack of transparency from the USDT. I forget it's Tether, right? Yeah, so Tether. I'm just wondering if there's any concern with regards to the lack of clarity and transparency from the Tether community or team with regards to using that stablecoin specifically.
I think the reason we're using that stablecoin specifically is because it's the most liquid right now, and we needed to choose one because having enough liquidity in any stablecoin right now until the bridges are set up is extremely hard. However, I think it is a really good question, and I actually want to ask Dark Knight to step on stage again because I know he's got quite a lot of thoughts on this.
Yeah, sure. Who asked the question, by the way?
Yes, Whip.
Yeah, so first I would definitely invite you, Whipper, to follow us on Twitter, and then from there get to our Discord. I would love to speak with you and with anybody that shares these concerns. I agree with you. I agree with what Iago said. It's the most liquid one, and it's used across all of the most respected exchanges, right? So you can look at FTX, and they're working closely with USDT. They're across the most chains as well. And right now they seem to be trading overall at peg. At the same time, we do want to give the opportunity not only to USDT and USDC, which are the two largest ones, they're also the most centralized ones. So, keeping with Sovryn's spirit, we are also establishing early conversations with projects like MakerDAO. We're also participating with the Fay Money protocol. So, creating those relationships. At the end of the day, what we want is liquidity. So we want to support decentralization, but we need to be realistic about the situation. Ideally, with the basket or the solution that the Bubblefish protocol will create, there will be a level of abstraction that will afford some decentralization, and also for the users of Bubblefish to hedge the risk across a selection of stablecoins that we will accept to bring on. I hope that answers kind of like your question and where we're going. But I would love to talk more about it with you off this channel.
And I think it's a
Cool.
really interesting topic. And it occurs to me that maybe we should just have, like, one of these days, like a sort of meeting just around stable coins, because it is such an important part of the ecosystem, and it is so different in its logic when it comes to decentralization. We're talking about the risks, how they can be managed, how sovereign should be thinking about them, and how users who want to remain sovereign should be thinking about them. So maybe we should put together like an AMA kind of thing, or a Q&A kind of thing, with some, like, a panel of experts. Actually, Exiles, maybe that would be a perfect sort of panel to have with the mini conference that we're thinking about.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So what we're planning on doing is the hackathon will probably run from 4 to 6 weeks. Seems to be the optimum to draw up the maximum amount of viable projects. And the hackathon will be sandwiched between 2 3-day events, start events, where we have speakers and panels and discussions. So 4 or 6 hours a day of people giving talks over 3 days at the beginning and the end of the hackathon. I think that could be a stablecoin discussion, would be really interesting. I could reach out to Nanex Cool from MakerDAO and different people. So if you guys have any in the community, if you guys have suggestions for either judges or speakers or companies in the ecosystem that could participate in the different tracks that we're putting together, please ping me directly on Discord with those ideas, and be happy to see how we can fit people in. Great idea, Iago.
Yeah, thanks. I'll reach out to you separately, Exile Surfer. Thank you, Iago.
All right. I think we're already at the hour. So I don't know if we have time for additional questions. But I think I'm going to hand it over to you, Ingemar.
Sure. I'll close it out. Also, Iago, you usually remain on the call to answer more questions, but I'm not sure if that is the case this week.
I would love to, but I think I'll stay on for another 10 minutes. But I basically have a meeting starting in 2 minutes, but they'll wait.
All right, cool. If you want to stick around for 2 more minutes for any more questions for Iago, feel free to stick around. But I do want to close this out. Thank you all for joining this call. Your support makes all the hard work worthwhile. What we are is a collective who is carving out a trail for financial freedom, dismantling what people know and understand about money, through our comics, through our messaging, through our videos, through our raps. All that help us spread the word and create more sovereign individuals. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ingalandia, and great rap.
Thank you.
I'd like to say something about the delay on the fix. So there's been some issues in understanding how it is that we can deploy contract changes, and it's clearly part of the policy that after a vote passes for a contract change, that we have a 48-hour period before it is that we can deploy the contract, so that it can be audited and people know what's actually going to happen. It's for protection of the users. So actually, we could have deployed today, but with this being an Easter weekend and with us having low dev count and looking at it overall, we decided that it was best to deploy the fix so that we can deal with the community questions and everybody onboarding, as I'm sure you're all familiar with and participating in our forums, how crazy that can get. We decided to do it at the beginning of the week rather this weekend. So I wanted to make that clear that there was an additional issue as to why it is that we moved it to next week.
Hey guys, I got a quick question. If nobody minds, I'm curious, how will the Sov BTC trading pair mechanics work? I'm just wondering. I know there's only going to be so much demand, like because only so many tokens have been unlocked. But if there's just crazy demand for the Sov token, if and when it opens up next week, is that going to impact the BTC USDT trading pair? Like, I'm just trying to think of how the AMM will essentially work next week. Like, if there's just crazy amounts of demand for Sov, like what are the impacts of that? Like, should we stock up on some USDT for like potential arbitrage opportunities? If somebody could speak to that, it'd be great.
That is a bullseye question, because I think it really cuts to the heart of how our system works in lots of different ways. And so, how will the SOV BTC trading? There's going to be a pool, an AMM pool, right? There are a number of AMM pools right now. There's like BTC USDT, BTC DOC, etc. It's going to be a new one. It's going to be BTC SOV, right? Now, most of the trading that will happen will probably be BTC to SOV, right? So if somebody is buying SOV, the price of SOV against the dollar, against Bitcoin will go up. If someone is selling, the price of Bitcoin against SOV will go up, right? And basically there's like, so the two prices that will, the single price that will move is the BTC to SOV price. However, it could get more complicated than that. So let's say somebody is trying to buy SOV with USDT. How does that work? So what they would actually be doing is they would be selling USDT to the system, and that would go to the USDT BTC pool. So USDT would get sold for BTC, and then BTC would get sold for SOV. So they would end up with SOV, but there would actually be two trades happening, and this happens automatically behind the scenes. But if a lot of people were doing that, what they would actually be doing is pushing up the price of BTC, which could also have a knock-on effect on the price of SOV, because basically sort of implicitly make the price of SOV lower versus BTC. So that is one of the reasons that we wanted to make sure that there was sufficient liquidity in the BTC USDT pool. And there may definitely be arbitrage opportunities. So if you have a USDT and you can get some USDT ready, probably the most profitable thing you could do right now is place that USDT into the BTC USDT pool as an LP, right, as a liquidity provider. And then if an arbitrage opportunity arises, you could actually just withdraw it from there and then sell or buy with that USDT. Although if the sort of flow that I just described were happening, the best way to arbit would be to sell BTC, right, and take advantage of the fact that the BTC price was going up. All that said, I don't anticipate that there will be all that much activity with USDT to BTC, simply because the vast majority of users hold way more BTC than they do hold USDT. There is one way that they could change, and if the bridges were ready before, this would almost certainly be implemented. Whether or not it will be implemented now, I cannot say, but one thing that you could potentially imagine people doing is going leveraged long on SOV, for example. In other words, using the margin trading. And the way that would happen is they would borrow USDT from the system, right? They would have some kind of collateral, let's say BTC. They would borrow USDT from the system, and then they would effectively buy SOV with it. And they don't they can do that with any asset. So you can always find the asset with the lowest interest rate. So for example, you could borrow BTC, sell the BTC for SOV. You could borrow BPRO, sell the BPRO for SOV. The nice thing about having the AMM system is that basically you can trade any two pairs, right? Because the system will automatically route between those two asset types. I think I probably answered much of your question, but are there parts that I didn't answer?
I think that broadly answers it. I guess the mechanics will just be interesting to see how it plays out. Like an example you gave, you kind of gave the impression that like the Sov price would go down and BTC price would go up, and so sell BTC. But my gut would tell me it'd be the opposite, right? That there'd be extreme demand for Sov, which would actually cause BTC to drop. But
yeah,
maybe I have it backwards there.
So I think the thing, like thinking through this, it's obviously we don't know what's going to happen. We know that about I think about 180 or 200 worth of 200 Bitcoin worth has been transferred by users into their wallets over the last week. Mostly, I think, in anticipation of the SOV listing. On the other hand, there's going to be about 2 million SOV that become available. So there's two possible scenarios. Well, there's more than two scenarios, but let's talk about two extreme scenarios, right? One extreme scenario is that everyone wants to buy and nobody wants to sell. That would send the price of SOV probably higher than it should be. And so then, people might want to sell their SOV into that because, it's gone to $100 per SOV, and that's insane, at least in my opinion. There's the other situation where getting BTC into the system has become much easier, but you could still imagine a situation where there are a lot of people who can't figure it out. They would love to buy SOV, but they still can't figure out how they get their BTC onto the system. And so but everyone on the system, who's participated in Genesis or Origins has some SOV, and so there could be a lot of people who want to sell. And then even if there is sort of organically in the world a lot of demand for SOV, there could be an artificial lack of demand within the system, in which case the price of SOV could drop below what it should be. And then sort of the way to benefit from that would be to sort of arb the difference between where the system is now, right? Where it's relatively still quite difficult to use and where it will be in a few weeks, plus the fact that probably in a few weeks there'll be centralized exchanges trading it, etc. And so I think on either of the extremes, I think you can probably make a pretty safe, it's not exactly an arb, but it's like arbing between the current state and the future state.
Odin.
Exactly. And if you have the wisdom to do that, I think you could potentially make a lot of money, assuming we even get into an extreme state.
Awesome. Thank you.
One of the things that I like to point out is that as long as the platform works, whatever extreme any trading goes on the platform is just a blip or a part of our history. Yeah. What's important is that the platform functions for those things to happen.
Yeah, XL, got a question about that. Do you know if the team will be allocating a specific amount of SOV for that AMM pool, the SOV BTC pool?
So I'm not party to how the allocations would be used to support the pools. That would be a question for Iago or Armando, what the strategy is on that.
Let me actually shoot that question back. Are there people here who would like to provide liquidity either in BTC or in SOV and act as liquidity market makers, basically liquidity providers when that goes live? And you don't have to sort of respond vocally. You can just go like this. So we can get a sense of whether or not people want to do that.
Yes, both.
Yeah, if we provide liquidity, of course. For Sov and get it back and just make the fees in the meantime. Yeah, for sure.
So
whoa, but hang on a second. Would there be a liquidity mining program also associated with that, or it's just market making straight up?
I think we should probably have a liquidity mining. for that as well.
Yeah, it would only make sense. I mean, otherwise people potentially
Yeah, and then we can
lose a
have it
crazy
under
amount
the
of.
slogan, "Yo, dog, I heard you like SOVs. Putting SOV onto your SOV." Yeah, I think even people who want to sell their SOV, the best way to do it is to do it as a maker, because then you basically, because look, in all likelihood, I don't know what's going to happen, but there's a chance that at least 50% up, 50% chance that the price of SOV goes up, in which case one way that you could sell SOV is just place it into the pool as a liquidity provider, and then the bids will eat it up, but you'll also be making the trading fees and the liquidity mining fees at the same time. So, that's if the price goes up, and if the price stays where it is, then you've also sort of like, that's a true arbitrage opportunity. Like if you know you want to sell an asset, the best way to sell that asset is to put it into the liquidity mining pool. But
does the team intend to supply any SOV to that pool, like initially?
We've certainly been discussing it. It's not a decision that has been taken yet, and it would need to be a decision made by the exchequer. But I think that is very likely.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best thing. You don't want extreme, crazy price swings.
For sure.
Yeah, from what I understand, so the mechanics under the way that the contracts are written, and the way that the allotments are vested or releasable, there's a determinative factor about where that would come from and how that would happen, which the team is working through.
Dragonly, if you're on the call, it might be a great idea to run another one of our polls and find out like which users are interested in using, who's planning on selling, who's planning on buying, who wants to be a liquidity provider. It might give us a sense of sort of where things are. Dragonly, are you here?
No, it doesn't look like he's on the call.
All right. Well, Excel, maybe I'll leave it with you then.
Gee, thanks. Like I don't have enough to do.
I think I can take one question if it's for me. If not, I'm gonna drop off. All right, guys. Well, in that case, I'm gonna drop off. Great talking to you guys again. It's a highlight of my 2 weeks. All right, guys. Cheers.
Thanks, man.
Hey,
bye.
Whipper and anybody else interested, actually, in terms of statistics and data display in the dashboard. Late last night, I was having a conversation with Betsy about the fact that we're going to need to be displaying what the circulating supply is. And so she's working on all the endpoints and all the data on the test net for us to do not only